Lewis Hamilton finished third in Shanghai, but that was the day Ferrari stopped looking like a broken dream and started looking like a real threat. That is why this podium landed so hard across Formula 1. After a brutal first season in red with 0 podiums, constant pressure, and growing doubt over whether this move had already gone wrong, Hamilton suddenly gave Ferrari something far more dangerous than points. He gave them belief, and because it happened at the same track where his Ferrari story had once hit its lowest point, the whole weekend carried a weight that went far beyond the result. This was not just an emotional moment, it was a warning sign. Hamilton qualified within a few tenths of pole, attacked around the outside at turn 1, and for a brief flash put Ferrari at the front of the race. Mercedes still had the stronger package, and the early standings already reflected that with 98 points to Ferrari's 67. But that is not the part that matters most. What no broadcast covered is this: Hamilton finally looked at ease in the car on Sunday, and once that starts happening, Ferrari becomes a much bigger problem for everyone chasing this title. That is why this podium felt heavier than a normal third place. The radio message sounded calm, but underneath it was the one thing Ferrari had been missing for months: trust. Hamilton did not sound like a driver relieved to escape another hard weekend. He sounded like a driver who had just seen proof that this move can still become something serious. The result got the headlines, but the shift inside that garage is the real story, and the numbers from this weekend explain exactly why. Lewis Hamilton arrived in Shanghai carrying far more than a normal race weekend. He was coming back to the same circuit where Ferrari had once left embarrassed, and this time the pressure was heavier because the whole paddock wanted to see whether anything had truly changed. By Sunday evening, the answer felt different. Hamilton had taken his first Ferrari Grand Prix podium, Antonelli had won for Mercedes at just 19, and Ferrari still left the track with something bigger than relief. What changed was the feeling around the team, because for the first time in a long time, this did not look like survival. It looked like the start of something. That shift came from the way the whole weekend unfolded. Hamilton put the Ferrari third on the grid in Shanghai, and then turned that into his first Ferrari podium as Mercedes locked out the top 2 with Antonelli first and George Russell second. Antonelli became the second youngest race winner in Formula 1 history, while Hamilton said afterward that he felt back to his best and called the result a big step after a difficult first year in red. What no broadcast covered is this: Ferrari did not leave China acting like a team grateful for scraps. They left looking like a team that had found a real direction. That is what made the weekend feel heavier than the podium photo itself. Hamilton sounded clear, settled, and fully locked in with the car, and that changes how every rival team reads Ferrari from this point forward. The emotional part of the story is easy to see, but the deeper part is harder to ignore. Shanghai was the first weekend where the result, the body language, and the race itself all pointed the same way. Ferrari still did not have the fastest car, and that is exactly why the next part matters so much, because the raw numbers from this race tell a much sharper story about where the SF26 really stands. Ferrari did not leave Shanghai with the fastest car, but the numbers still gave them something real to build on. Hamilton started third after qualifying just over 3/10 off Antonelli's pole lap of 1:32.064, then jumped both Mercedes at the start before the race settled back into its true order. That matters, because it shows Ferrari can strike early even when it cannot yet control the full distance. The raw results said Mercedes won 2 again on him, but the deeper red from China was that Ferrari finally had a car capable of putting Hamilton into the fight at the start of a Grand Prix, and that shifts the pressure onto every team behind them. The shape of the race tells the harder truth. Antonelli still won by 5.515 seconds, and Reuters reported that Hamilton himself admitted Ferrari were closer to winning again, but not there yet, which says a lot about where the SF26 sits right now. The car could launch, defend, and stay in the lead battle for a moment, but once the long run settled down, Mercedes still had the cleaner package. Hamilton's own tone after the race was important because he did not sound defeated. He sounded convinced that progress was now visible. That is the part that changes everything, because Ferrari no longer look lost, they look incomplete. And those are 2 very different problems, and that is where this story gets complicated. A car that is good enough to attack into turn 1, but not yet strong enough to own the race, creates a different kind of pressure inside Ferrari, because once the wind slips away, the fight shifts inward. Hamilton had done the hard part by getting himself into the front battle, but the next threat was already forming in the other red car behind him. That is why the next phase of this race mattered so much, because Mercedes were not the only problem Ferrari had to survive in Shanghai. Lewis Hamilton turned Shanghai into chaos before the race had even settled. From third on the grid, he saw Antonelli cover Russell into turn 1, found the space on the outside, and swept a Ferrari into the lead of a Grand Prix for the first time in this new chapter of his career. For a few seconds, the whole shape of the race looked wrong. Mercedes had locked out the front row, Antonelli had taken pole at 19, and yet Hamilton was the man leading into the second corner. That was the flash that lit up the paddock because it forced everyone watching to ask the same thing. Had Ferrari found a way to hit Mercedes before the race even came to them? The answer came fast, and it came hard. Antonelli took the lead back by lap 2, then controlled the race well enough to win by 5.515 seconds, with Russell completing another Mercedes 1-2. Ferrari had enough to strike, but not enough to hold the front once the stint settled and the race pace told the truth. What no broadcast covered is this. Hamilton's opening attack still mattered because it exposed the one area where Ferrari could hurt Mercedes. The first phase of the race, the launch, the confidence, the willingness to place the car where most drivers would back out. But once the order stabilized, the silver cars still had the cleaner answer over a full distance. That is where the real tension began. Hamilton had shown he could punch his way into the fight, but Shanghai was no longer about whether Ferrari could win from there. It became about what happens when the win slips out of reach and two Ferrari drivers are left staring at the same podium place. Mercedes had controlled the race up front, but the next crisis was about to break much closer to home because the most dangerous part of Ferrari's afternoon was not ahead of Hamilton at all. It was arriving fast in the other red car behind him. By the middle phase of the race, Ferrari had already learned the hardest lesson of their afternoon. The silver cars were strong enough to control the front, but the real danger now was sitting inside Ferrari's own garage. Charles Leclerc was not fading away behind Hamilton. He was closing in and turning the fight for third into the most tense battle on the track. Reuters described it as a spirited intra-team battle, while Formula One's own race coverage called it race long and respectful. That matters because once the win was gone, Ferrari still had one more crisis to manage. Two drivers in the same car on the same day, refusing to give away the final podium place. What no broadcast covered is this. The fight itself became a test of how much Ferrari trusted its own drivers. Formula One reported that Leclerc said he enjoyed the battle, while Fred Vasseur admitted he was a bit scared watching the two Ferraris race each other so hard in Shanghai. That tells you everything about the balance Ferrari had to hold. They needed the freedom to let both men race, but they also knew one wrong move would throw away a podium and leave the whole team answering difficult questions on Sunday night. This was not only about wheel-to-wheel action, it was about control, discipline, and how much risk Ferrari were willing to accept in public. Hamilton came through it and kept third. Leclerc had to settle for fourth, and that outcome mattered for more than the finishing order. The battle showed Ferrari had two drivers ready to push right to the edge. But it also showed how thin the line can be between strong competition and self-inflicted damage. A podium was secured, yet the bigger message was more uncomfortable. Ferrari may now be quick enough to create problems for Mercedes some weekends, but they are also quick enough to create new pressure inside their own team. And once a race starts exposing pressure from both outside and inside, the ghosts of what happened here 1 year earlier come rushing back into the story. Shanghai was already carrying a scar before a single lap of this race even began. 1 year earlier, Ferrari had left the same circuit with both cars thrown out of the final result, turning what should have been a strong weekend into one of the most damaging moments of Hamilton's first season in red. He had won the sprint there, and which made the collapse even harder to take, because it briefly looked like Ferrari had found a way forward before the Grand Prix wiped that feeling out in full view of the paddock. That old damage never really left the story, it just waited for Hamilton to come back and face it again. The details made it worse, because this was not one simple mistake. Reuters reported that Leclerc's Ferrari fell below the minimum weight limit after the race, while Hamilton's car was ruled illegal for excessive plank wear underneath the floor. Formula One's official explanation said Hamilton's rear skid block measured below the required 9 millimeters, while Leclerc's car came in too light after the fuel was drained. Add Pierre Gasly's Alpine to that list, and China became the first Grand Prix since 2004 to see 3 disqualifications from the final classification. That is why Shanghai stayed attached to Ferrari as more than a bad day. It became a symbol of a team getting the the margins wrong when the pressure was highest. So when Hamilton stood on the podium here again, the weight of the moment had nothing to do with nostalgia. It came from the fact that this was the same place where Ferrari had once exposed every weakness in public, and now it had become the place where Hamilton finally gave them something steady to hold on to. The result did not erase the old failure, but it changed what this circuit means in his Ferrari story. And once a track stops being a reminder of collapse and starts becoming proof of recovery, the people around that moment begin to matter just as much as the race itself. Lewis Hamilton's podium mattered because the people standing around it made the moment feel larger than a normal top 3 finish. Kimi Antonelli, still only 19, had just taken his first Formula 1 win for Mercedes and confirmed why Toto Wolff trusted him with one of the biggest seats in the sport, while Hamilton took Ferrari to its first real emotional high of this new partnership. Reuters reported that Wolff said he felt overwhelmed by the result, and that feeling tells you how unusual this podium was. It was not just one team celebrating. It was one of those rare afternoons where the whole paddock could feel a shift in the story. That feeling got even stronger because Peter Bonington was right there in the middle of it. Hamilton's former Mercedes race engineer was now on the winning side of the garage with Antonelli, which gave the podium a strange sense of past and present crashing into each other at once. Reuters said the scene carried a powerful reminder of Mercedes' past, present, and future, and that is exactly what made it hit so hard. Hamilton had not won the race, but he shared the podium with the young driver who replaced him and the engineer whose voice had shaped so much of his greatest success. You could feel the history in it without anyone needing to explain it, and that is why the result now feels bigger than a single afternoon in Shanghai. Antonelli's win pushed the new generation further into the spotlight. Hamilton's podium dragged Ferrari back into the emotional center of the title picture. And Wolff's reaction showed that even Mercedes understood they had just witnessed something that carried more weight than the finishing order. The race was over, but the bigger consequence was only just starting to form, because once a podium begins connecting old rivals, new stars, and a team trying to rebuild its belief, the next question stops being emotional and becomes much more serious. What does this actually mean for the championship from here? Shanghai did not hand Ferrari the fastest car, but it may have handed them the clearest path to becoming Mercedes' main problem. Antonelli's win and Russell's second place gave Mercedes another 1-2 finish, while Hamilton's podium kept Ferrari firmly in the fight behind them, and that matters even more because the rest of the expected challengers stumbled badly on the same day. McLaren lost both Norris and Piastri before the race even began with technical failures, while Verstappen came into the weekend already calling his Red Bull difficult to drive. The field did not open up for Ferrari because they dominated it. It opened up because Ferrari looked stable while too many others looked fragile. That is why this result carries championship weight far beyond one podium ceremony. Reuters reported that Russell's lead in the standings was cut to 4 points by Antonelli after China, which tells you Mercedes still owned the strongest start to this season, but Ferrari's position is just as important because Hamilton and Leclerc finished 3rd and 4th while McLaren scored nothing. The number Ferrari did not publish was the one that mattered most, not a lap time, not a sector split. But the fact that this team suddenly looks like the one most likely to punish Mercedes whenever the front row lockout slips. Ferrari are not setting the pace yet, but they are starting to look like the team best placed to turn any Mercedes weakness into a real title fight. And that is what gives Hamilton's podium its real meaning. This was not a fairy tale ending, and it was not proof that Ferrari have solved everything. It was something more dangerous than that. A first sign that the partnership now has shape, rhythm, and a reason for rivals to pay attention. Antonelli's rise has made the future impossible to ignore, but Hamilton's answer in red has made the present far more interesting than many expected after 2025. Shanghai did not close the story. It turned it into a championship question. One, because now the whole paddock has to find out whether this was only one strong weekend or the first warning that Ferrari and Hamilton are finally becoming real.